even coffee shops. Because what he said was clear, it was direct, and it was unapologetic. And some people weren't used to hearing that kind of voice from India, not in that way, not with that kind of confidence. Now, let me say this. I've been around long enough to know that when a leader speaks with that kind of clarity, when he says to the world, we will not be dictated to, we will not be pushed around, we will chart our own course, it may surprise some people, but it shouldn't. Because India is not a country waiting for permission. India is not a nation looking to be validated. It is one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, one of the largest democracies in the world, and today, it is stepping onto the global stage with a voice that can't be ignored. And that matters. It matters because America, for all our power, for all our influence, has to recognize that leadership today doesn't mean telling other nations what to do. Leadership means listening. Leadership means respecting. Leadership means understanding that the world is more interconnected than it has ever been. Now, I know some folks here at home may not see it that way. Some folks think leadership means pounding the table, or sending out a tweet in the middle of the night, or picking fights just to pick fights. And yes, I'm talking about Donald Trump. Because for 4 years we watched an administration confuse bluster with strength. We watched as allies were insulted, partnerships were weakened, and America's standing in the world was shaken. And when you operate that way, you miss the deeper truth. Real strength is not about making others small. It's about lifting them up so that together we can all stand taller. That's why Jaishankar's words struck such a chord. Because they weren't just India talking back to the world, they were India reminding the world that respect must be mutual. That sovereignty is not up for negotiation, and that partnership must be built on equality, not intimidation. And let me tell you, when Americans hear that, we shouldn't feel threatened. We should feel challenged to be better, challenged to match that confidence with humility. Challenged to recognize that the future is not going to be shaped by one country acting alone, but by many nations acting together. See, the story of the 21st century is not going to be a story of America versus the world, or the West versus the East. It's going to be about whether we, as democracies, can find the courage to stand together, whether we can build bridges of trade and technology and education, whether we can tackle climate change and poverty, not as competitors but as partners, and that's where the opportunity lies. Because while some may see Jaishankar's words as a challenge, I see them as an invitation. An invitation for America to reimagine its role, to step forward not as the loudest voice in the room, but as the most trusted, not as the nation that dictates, but as the nation that collaborates. So, my friends, let us not be unsettled by what we heard. Let us not fall back into fear or nostalgia for some moment when America stood alone at the top and thought it could call all the shots, because that world is gone, and deep down we know it. The question is whether we are prepared to embrace the world as it is, and to lead with wisdom, not arrogance. India has spoken. America must listen. And together, we must decide whether the future will be built on walls of suspicion or on bridges of trust. That choice, as always, will define not only our place in history, but the kind of world we leave to our children. My friends, I want to talk tonight about something that goes beyond politics, beyond party, beyond the daily noise of our headlines. I want to talk about respect. Respect for nations. Respect for voices that have too often been ignored. Respect for a partner that has risen with quiet determination and now speaks with unmistakable clarity. I want to talk about India. Now, I've had the privilege of visiting India. I've walked the streets of Mumbai. I've seen the beauty of New Delhi. I've listened to the chants of children who, even in their small voices, carried the rhythm of a democracy more than 1 billion strong. And I have to tell you, when you see it, when you feel it, you realize something important. This is not a country waiting to be discovered. This is a country that has already arrived. Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's foreign minister, made that clear. With a steady voice, with the precision of a diplomat who knows exactly what he's saying, he reminded the world that India is not here to be lectured to. India is not here to play second fiddle. India is here to lead in its own way, on its own terms, and with its own values. And let me just pause here, because that's not something every American is used to hearing. For generations, we've gotten comfortable with the idea that America sets the agenda, that America speaks, and the rest of the world follows. That we can dictate, and others simply nod their heads. But that old world is changing, and it's changing fast. Some folks don't like that. Some folks see another nation's confidence as a threat. They look at Jaishankar's words and they bristle. They say, how dare he? They cling to the idea that leadership must always mean domination, that respect can only be earned if someone else is made small. And let's be honest, we've seen that mindset right here at home. We saw it in the last administration. We saw it when Donald Trump thought that insulting allies was strength, when he believed that cozying up to autocrats made him tough, when he thought that shouting louder made America respected. But here's the truth. The world doesn't work that way anymore. Strength without respect is just noise. Power without partnership is just isolation. And leadership without listening is just arrogance. So when Jaishankar spoke, when he said clearly and without hesitation that India would not be pressured, that it would decide its path in the world, I didn't hear a challenge to America. I heard a reminder to America. A reminder that respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. A reminder that if we want allies, if we want partners, if we want to shape this century together, we can't treat others as junior members of some club. We have to treat them as equals, and here's the thing, India deserves that respect. Not just because of its size, not just because of its markets or its military, but because of its resilience. Because in a world where democracy is under attack, India has held fast to its democratic spirit. Because in a time of doubt, India has shown confidence. And because at a moment when too many nations are retreating behind walls, India is stepping forward to say, we will be heard. Now, I know some Americans might say, well, if India's voice grows stronger, does that mean our voice grows weaker? And the answer is no. That's the old way of thinking. That's the Trump way of thinking. The zero-sum game where if someone else wins, you must lose. But the world doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. If India grows stronger, if India speaks with confidence, then democracy grows stronger. The idea that diverse, complex, noisy people can govern themselves with dignity grows stronger, and that is good for all of us. You see, when I listen to Jaishankar, I don't hear just the words of a diplomat. I hear the echo of Gandhi, who taught us that strength can be found in truth. I hear the echo of Nehru, who reminded us that independence is not about isolation, but about dignity. I hear the echo of every Indian mother and father who sends their child to school believing that tomorrow can be brighter than today. And I hear the echo of every American who understands that our fates are tied together, that in this century no nation can solve its problems alone. That's why respect matters, because when we respect one another, we can work together. When we respect one another, we can take on climate change, we can lift millions out of poverty, we can fight pandemics before they spread. But when we don't, when respect is replaced by arrogance, then even the strongest partnerships fracture. And we saw what happened when respect was abandoned. We saw America lose ground under Trump. We saw trust erode. We saw alliances weaken. And we saw adversaries grow bolder. So let's not repeat those mistakes. Let's not treat India's confidence as a threat. Let's treat it as a chance to deepen our bonds, to strengthen our democracies, to prove that partnership in the 21st century is not about one nation standing above the rest, but about many nations standing together. And let me be clear, respect doesn't mean we will always agree. Friends don't always agree. Partners don't always see eye to eye. But respect means we listen. It means we argue without breaking apart. It means that when we disagree, we do so in the spirit of two nations who know that the bonds of democracy and the bonds of humanity are stronger than any temporary dispute. India has earned that respect. Jaishankar's words remind us of that. And if America is wise, if we are thoughtful, if we remember our better angels, we will not see India's rise as something to fear, but as something to celebrate. Because a stronger India does not weaken America, a respected India does not diminish America. It makes the world safer, it makes democracy stronger, and it makes the future brighter for all our children. That is what respect looks like. That is what partnership requires, and that is what this moment demands. My fellow Americans, I want to take a moment to speak directly to us, not as Democrats or Republicans, not as conservatives or liberals, but as citizens of this country we all love. Because when leaders abroad speak with conviction, when they remind the world that dignity and sovereignty are not up for debate, the question is not just what it means for them. The question is what it means for us. See, when Dr. Jaishankar spoke, his words weren't only about India. They were also about how the world sees America, about whether we are prepared to live up to the values we claim, or whether we're content to just talk about them, about whether we understand that in this new century, respect is not given simply because of our name, it's earned by our actions. Now, here in the United States, we've got work to do. We've got to recognize that for all our power, for all our wealth, for all our history, we don't get to lead by default anymore. We get to lead when we choose cooperation over arrogance. We get to lead when we show humility in the face of other people's experiences. We get to lead when we prove that democracy can still deliver for our workers, for our families, for our children. And let's be honest, there are voices here at home who don't see it that way. There are voices that tell us America must be feared, not respected. That we should tear up alliances, turn our backs on our friends, and build walls literal and figurative between ourselves and the world. We heard those voices loudest during the last administration. We heard them when Donald Trump stood on the world stage and insulted allies who had stood with us for generations. We heard them when he praised strongmen and dictators, confusing flattery with strength. And we heard them when he suggested that America's greatness could be measured not by the quality of our partnerships, but by the volume of his applause. But America is better than that. We know that leadership isn't about swagger. It isn't about picking fights or sending late night rants on social media. Leadership is about lifting people up. It's about earning trust. It's about making the hard choices that don't always make headlines but do make progress. So when Jaishankar says India will not be pressured, when he says India will chart its own path, we shouldn't be alarmed. We should be reminded that every nation has that right, and we should ask ourselves, are we living up to the same standard? Are we making choices that reflect our values? Are we standing up not just for our power, but for our principles? Because the truth is, America's future is tied to the world's future. We can't solve climate change on our own. We can't contain pandemics by ourselves. We can't build a strong economy if we wall ourselves off from the fastest growing markets in the world, and we certainly can't protect democracy by tearing down its institutions at home. That's why my message to Americans is simple. We need to look outward with confidence, not fear. We need to embrace the rise of nations like India, not as threats, but as partners. And we need to remember that the strength of our democracy here, in this country, is the foundation of any respect we hope to earn abroad. Now, I know it's tempting sometimes to retreat, to say the world's too complicated, that America should just look after itself and let everyone else figure things out. I know that's what some politicians preach. It's easier, it's louder, but it's not leadership. It's abdication. And if we choose that path, if we follow the Trump model of pulling back, insulting others, retreating into ourselves, then we shouldn't be surprised when other nations step forward to fill that void. But if we choose the better path, if we choose to strengthen our democracy at home, if we choose to treat our partners with respect, if we choose to stand for principles even when it's hard, then America will remain what it has always aspired to be. Not just a country that wields power, but a country that inspires hope. So my fellow Americans, the message is clear. The world is watching, India is speaking, and we must decide how we respond, not with fear, not with arrogance, but with humility, with respect, and with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who we are and what we stand for. Because in the end, America doesn't lose when others rise. America loses only when we forget our own values. And America wins, the world wins when we lead with respect. My friends, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is this: no nation, no matter how strong, no matter how wealthy, can solve the great challenges of our time alone. Not America, not India, not China, not any country on its own, because the problems we face, they don't stop at borders. They don't carry passports. They don't ask about ideology. Climate change doesn't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. A pandemic doesn't check your religion before it spreads. A financial crisis doesn't stop at the water's edge. That is why cooperation, real cooperation, is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It's not a slogan. It's not a talking point. It is the only way we move forward. Now, when I hear leaders like Dr. Jaishankar speak with conviction, reminding the world that India will not be pushed around, I don't hear defiance. I hear an invitation to reimagine what cooperation looks like in the 21st century. Not one nation at the top telling everyone else what to do. Not some countries making the rules while others are expected to simply follow. But genuine partnership built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and a recognition that our destinies are tied together. That's what global cooperation requires. It requires humility. It requires listening. It requires the patience to understand that progress is slower when everyone has a seat at the table. But in the long run, it's stronger because everyone has a stake in the outcome. And let me be clear, that's not always easy. It's tempting, especially when times are tough, to go it alone, to build walls, to say we'll look out for ourselves and the rest of the world can fend for itself. We heard a lot of that during the last administration. We heard Donald Trump declare that alliances were burdens, not blessings. We watched him walk away from agreements that generations of Americans had built, agreements that made us safer, made us healthier, made us stronger. And for a few years, America turned inward. We put up barriers. We withdrew from the world, and in doing so, we left a vacuum that others were eager to fill. But that approach, that America first rhetoric, it didn't make us stronger. It made us isolated. It didn't earn respect. It eroded it. Because the truth is, you can't lead the world if you're not willing to work with the world. You can't expect loyalty if you give none in return. And you can't build lasting security by tearing down the very partnerships that keep us safe. So here's the choice before us. We can fall back into that old pattern, each nation retreating behind its borders, each leader boasting about their strength while the planet warms, while pandemics spread, while poverty deepens. Or we can choose a different path. We can choose cooperation. We can choose to work together, not because it's easy, not because it's quick, but because it's the only way forward. Think about it. If America and India, two of the largest democracies in the world, can stand side by side, respecting one another, listening to one another, building together, what message does that send? It tells the world that democracy is not fragile, it is resilient. It tells young people from Kansas to Kerala that freedom works. It tells autocrats and dictators that their model of fear and repression cannot match the power of people who work together in trust. That's the power of cooperation. It's not just about solving problems. It's about setting an example. It's about showing the world that in an age of division, unity is still possible. That in a time of cynicism, hope still matters. That in a century where so much is uncertain, we can still choose to build a future together. Now, I'm not naive. I know there will be disagreements. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when it feels like cooperation is too slow, too messy, too complicated. But the alternative, the world of suspicion, of isolation, of Trump-style nationalism that treats every partner as a rival, that world is far more dangerous. That world is weaker, not stronger. So let us reject the easy cynicism. Let us reject the false choice between strength and cooperation. Because the truth is, the strongest nations are the ones that know how to work with others. The most respected leaders are the ones who listen as much as they speak. And the most enduring progress is built not on domination, but on partnership. If we remember that, if America remembers that, if India remembers that, if the world remembers that, then there is no challenge we cannot face together. My friends, we've spent this time reflecting on words that came from halfway across the world. Words that carried conviction, that carried pride, that carried the certainty of a nation ready to stand tall. And those words remind us of something fundamental. The future will not wait for us to catch up. The future is being written every single day, by leaders and by citizens, by nations big and small. The only question is whether America will play its role wisely, or whether we will let fear, arrogance, or division pull us back. Now, I know there are those who will tell you that America has no choice but to demand, to dictate, to dominate. That's the easy rhetoric. That's the applause line. We heard plenty of it during the last administration. We heard Donald Trump boast about America's strength while alienating allies. We saw him celebrate nationalism while dismissing cooperation. We saw him treat respect as weakness and bullying as power. And for 4 years the world watched America retreat from its promise. But here's the thing, that's not who we are. That's not who we have to be. Because the story of America has never been about one man's ego or one party's slogans. It has been about something bigger. It has been about a people who believe that freedom matters, that democracy matters, that dignity matters not just for ourselves, but for all people everywhere. And so when India speaks with confidence, when Dr. Jaishankar says his nation will not be silenced, Americans should not hear a threat. We should hear a call to rise to our own best traditions, a call to prove that our leadership is not about fear, but about faith. Faith in our values, faith in our partnerships. Faith that when we lead with respect, the world follows with trust. That's the challenge before us. To recognize that in this century, power is not measured by how many countries bow down to us, but by how many stand with us. To understand that the measure of America's greatness is not in how loudly we talk, but in how steadfastly we listen. And to accept that real strength is not about tearing others down, but about lifting all of us up. Now, that won't be easy. We live in a time of polarization. We live in a time when cynicism is easier than hope, when division is easier than unity. And yes, we live in a time when politicians will exploit those fears, when they will tell you that America can only be great if others are made small, that we can only lead if we go it alone, that cooperation is weakness. That respect is surrender, but we know better, we've seen better. We know that the greatness of America has always come from our ability to bring people together, immigrants from every corner of the globe, workers of every faith and color, communities that learned, often painfully, that our diversity is not a burden but our strength. And we know that greatness abroad comes the same way, by bringing nations together, by treating others with dignity, by proving that democracy is not an American idea, but a universal one. So tonight, as we think about India's words, let's also think about our responsibility. Let's remember that the world is watching. Let's remember that when America chooses fear, the world trembles. But when America chooses hope, the world moves. When America chooses division, democracy falters. But when America chooses unity, democracy flourishes. When America chooses Trump's vision of isolation, we shrink.